So, what if the historical foundations of one of the world's biggest religions just weren't what they seem? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty controversial argument, one based on the research of Dr. Jay Smith, that really challenges the traditional origin story of Islam.
I mean, we're talking about a global faith here. Islam has nearly 2 billion followers today. It is the fastest growing religion on the planet, and its influence is, well, you just can't deny it.
And at the very heart of this faith is a foundational story every believer knows. It centers on a prophet, a man named Muhammad, a holy book, the Quran, and a sacred city, Mecca. But here's the puzzle, and this is really the core of the research we're looking at today. What if the actual historical, archaeological, and written records from the 7th century itself are completely silent on this story? This one question is the key that unlocks this entire investigation.
So to really understand the challenge being made here, we first have to just quickly go over the standard Islamic narrative. This is the foundational story, and it's built on 3 absolutely essential pillars. The traditional timeline, as you can see, is really clear and specific. The story goes that Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 AD. He started receiving divine revelations in 610, moved over to Medina in 622, and then passed away in 632. This sequence of events is absolutely fundamental to the faith.
And these 3 things represent what the source material calls the 3 legs of the stool. For the traditional account to hold up, the historical reality of this specific man, this book, and this place during the 7th century is, well, it's completely non-negotiable. Okay, so this brings us to the central problem that this research highlights, a huge gap in time between when these events supposedly happened and when they were actually first written down. Dr. Jay Smith, whose work we're explaining, frames the core question just like this. If the story is historical, he asks, where's the contemporary historical proof? Now, this timeline is really fascinating. Muhammad dies in 632, but according to the source, the first full biography we have is from a man named Ibn Hisham, who died in 833. The first major collection of his sayings and actions, the Hadith, comes from al-Bukhari, who died in 870. You see that? That's a gap of over 200 years, 2 full centuries. So here's the crucial question this raises. Can a story really be passed down orally for 200 years without being changed or, embellished a bit before it's finally put to paper? The source suggests this massive gap is a major historical problem. And this leads us to the first big piece of evidence the source presents. It's a linguistic argument, and it starts with the prophet's name itself. You see, back in the 7th century, Arabic script was very different. It didn't have vowels, not even the little dots that help you tell many consonants apart today. So the name that we now know as Muhammad would have just appeared as 4 consonants, MHMD. So the source argues that while we read Muhammad as a personal name, that root MHMD is actually a title. It means something like the praised one or the anointed one, sort of a messianic honorific. And this wasn't some new term they came up with. The source points out that Muhammad actually shows up in the Hebrew Old Testament, and even more striking, Christian writers like St. Ambrose used it as a title for Jesus Christ centuries before Islam even existed. All this suggests that the Praised One was a pretty common religious title floating around the region. All right, the second major line of questioning from the source has to do with geography. The argument is, look, if Mecca was the center of a new religion and a major trade hub, it should show up in the historical record, right? And this slide really lays out a stark contrast. On one side, you've got the descriptions from Islamic texts, a fertile place, streams, olives, fruit. On the other side, you've got the geographical and historical reality presented by the source, a bone-dry, arid valley. The texts call Mecca the mother of all settlements and a huge trade hub, but the source claims it doesn't appear on a single map or in any non-Islamic texts until the year 741 AD. So according to this research, how many times was Mecca mentioned on any trade map or in any external business records before the mid-8th century? The answer is 0. Not once. And then there's this, another piece of the puzzle. According to research cited in the source, the Qibla, that's the direction of prayer for Muslims, in the earliest known mosques doesn't actually point towards Mecca. Instead, they all seem to be oriented towards the city of Petra, which is 600 miles to the north. So if the source's arguments about the 200-year gap, the name, and the location have merit, what's the alternative? How did the story we all know today actually come to be? Well, the source proposes this alternative five-step timeline. It starts with an early Arab monotheistic movement, waiting for a messiah they call the Praised One, or MHMD. Fast forward a century or so, and the ruling Abbasid dynasty needs a uniquely Arab origin story to unify their empire. So, according to this theory, they literally write the history. They take that title, MHMD, and reinterpret it as the personal name Muhammad. They create a full biography for him and place it all in a new religious center, Mecca.
So the crucial point here, from this perspective, is that the foundational narrative of Islam wasn't a history that was recorded as it happened, but a story that was constructed centuries later to serve a political and cultural need. It was written back into history.
And this quote from the source material really drives that point home. The claim is that the written accounts we rely on for the story of early Islam are separated from the actual events by this enormous, enormous gulf of time. Ultimately, the source material leaves us with this really powerful question. It presents a historical challenge, suggesting the foundations of this well-established narrative might be built on different ground than we thought. And it asks us all to consider, what happens when we apply standard historical criticism to a sacred story?